when that's running, it's a class building down there in the business district, and some really high class tenants. And when you see them using the system, and giving you a happy smile and two thumbs up as they see you in the lobby, as you're sort of keeping an eye on it. I mean, there's something just when you bring that smile to somebody's face. And I mean, elevators aren't normally something people smile about much, right? I mean, generally oh, I hope I don't get trapped in this darn thing.
Right.
Or, you normally hear the bad side of things, but to see the good part of it, and there's obviously a lot of good. I mean, we move a lot of people around the world,
Sure.
around the US and
Every
Canada
day.
every day, on our products. So, that's
That's
something
awesome.
that every elevator engineer, I mean, from the people who design it, to the people in the factories who build it, to the customers that we sell to, who install it and service it, they should be proud. I mean, it's a pretty unique industry in that regard.
Absolutely. Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers. Today, our guest is Jason Armistead, Software Engineering Manager with G.A.L. Manufacturing. Jason started in the elevator industry as a 17-year-old after responding to an ad in the newspaper in Sydney, Australia. He moved to the USA in 2006 and has worked in the industry for 38 years. Although the work of an elevator engineer is often behind the scenes, Jason finds great satisfaction in seeing his software and innovations being used and appreciated by customers. While working in the software realm, he has also been fortunate to spend a lot of time in the field at job sites, along many talented mechanics and field engineers. Jason has had a long and fulfilling career, and he encourages others to consider the elevator industry as a rewarding career path. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. I'm excited. It's always fun talking with you, and so to be able to dig a little bit deeper into your background is something I've been looking forward to. And I'm just curious, did you ever in your life think you would grow up to be an elevator professional?
Absolutely not. I grew up in a small country town where probably the biggest elevators were a couple of three-stop hydraulics. So
And obviously not in the U.S., right? I mean,
correct. I grew up in Australia, a couple of hours south of Sydney.
nice, nice. So how did you decide you wanted to be an engineer?
Well, interesting story. My grandfather was in construction. He did a lot of excavation and the Sydney airport runways. His company reclaimed some land for that. My dad was a civil engineer. He worked for the main roads department for the state, and then he worked for the local town council in the town I grew up. So I guess I was surrounded by engineering influences for a lot of my life.
What was it that you think that first like started clicking in your mind that, hey, I really want to be an engineer. I want to take things apart and put them back together. And
Yeah, interesting. Well, I remember I'd go in sometimes with my dad to the council. He sometimes did some after hours work on a weekend. I'd go in there and he'd do his thing, and the computer terminal there. I'd play around, do some games on that. He logged me into the games account they had, which was always fun.
right.
I picked up some computer books there. I'm like, hey, maybe I can learn to program. Um, our school got a computer, an Apple II, when I was in seventh grade. And I beat the teacher at a game called Lemonade Stand, so I was kind of hooked on that. Um, and then, I visit my grandfather's place. He had an old combination radio and record player. When he was
Mm.
getting rid of that, I got the screwdrivers out and pulled it apart and looked at all the, capacitors and valves and everything that was inside that. So I guess I had the engineer gene driving me along.
Right, right. So what was it that got you started in elevators?
Well, interesting. So I finished high school and I enrolled in a electrical engineering degree. And the university I was doing it at was a one that only offered it part time. So it took 6 years of part time study
Wow.
to actually complete that, and you had to get industrial experience. So originally, I'd applied for a few jobs. Some I got rejected from. One was with the state railways, which sounded interesting. The other one was with Otis Elevator. There was a small
Right.
ad in the Sydney newspaper. It was about probably a couple of inches square, and it just said trainee engineers wanted. Um, and So I contacted them, and didn't hear back from them initially. Ended up briefly working for the railways, and then Otis said, "Hey, we'd like to interview you." So I came in for the interview, and they offered me a job. So I
So as a training engineer, you essentially had high school under your belt.
correct.
That's pretty impressive that I guess they, just would bring you in with really, you obviously your college yet to go, you're so
Yeah.
much yet to do. That's neat.
Yeah. I mean, I'd done a good number of engineering subjects, in the last couple of years of high school.
Okay.
In Australia, you have like a higher school certificate that you complete year 12 with, and so you have 2 year courses. So, I'd done, physics and chemistry and
Okay.
advanced math and an engineering science class on materials and tech drawing and stuff like that. So I guess I had some credential, and I was a top 2% student in the state.
Cool.
So that was always a bonus. Um, and yeah, they took a chance on me for sure. But my manager at the time, a guy called Ken Muller, he believed in, getting people in early and training them up, and he saw that as a good opportunity for the company.
Well, it seems to have stuck. I mean, you've been with the industry how long now?
It's coming up on 38 years.
That's
So yeah.
awesome. How long was it before you as a 17, 18-year-old were like, "Oh, hey, this is what I want to do." Right? This is not just a job, but this is becoming me.
Yeah. I was fortunate. I mean, the people at Otis were good people that I started working with, and they really took me under their wing and were keen to, teach me everything that they'd learned. I mean, some of the people were, people that had done controller designs and worked on a lot of their then current products. And I was young Jason to some of the
Right.
older draftsmen in the department, engineering department. In fact, I still get called that when I catch up with them from time to time. So I'm still young Jason. But they gave me a lot of opportunities, and I really enjoyed. I mean, the people, the nature of the work. Sometimes I think you can get pigeonholed into just doing one thing, but
Right.
elevators offer a broad range of different technologies and different aspects, whether it's purely electrical, for me, the software, which is ultimately where I've gone most, the design, the opportunity to, do some problem solving and, you know, creating new and innovative products. I mean, all those things are part of what our industry offers. So,
Yeah. So did your job? I mean, you said it was like a 6-year program, so it took you 6 or so years to finish your degree, and then I mean, did your job change dramatically once you finished your degree, or did it just kind of all
yeah.
work together from the beginning?
I mean, it definitely changed over the course of those years. It ended up being longer than 6 years, for a bunch of reasons. But initially I spent some time with a draftsman redrawing. I remember it was a hotel dumbwaiter out in Perth in Western Australia. So I remember redrawing that one, as one of my first little forays to understand just the symbols on a wiring diagram.
Right.
And then it was working with other electrical engineers and software, doing some programming with the early systems, and it just went from there. So
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say you love most about the industry? I mean, you obviously made it your career.
yeah.
You've stuck with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, for one, the people. I mean, definitely, there's such a variety of great people in our industry, and a
Mm.
lot of people that are really passionate about it. Um, I'd say they're, true craftsmen, you know, at the top of their game. Whether that's people designing and they've got a real passion for design, or the installers who do such a great job of getting a building up and running initially, or the maintenance mechanics, um, who keep the equipment running. My boss sent me out, uh, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months in. He sent me out with a field mechanic on a route in the Sydney Central Business District, and he said, "Go out there for 4 months.
Wow.
learn all you can about elevators, and then come back and tell me everything you learned. And so I was with a mechanic. I was wearing the overalls and the steel cap boots and all that sort of stuff, and going to classes in the afternoons and evenings, because that was the way it was with my degree program. Um, and so that's what I did. I mean, I painted machine room floors. I cleaned door locks on the top of a car, swept out pits, recovered people's keys and umbrellas and everything they dropped. Helped with breakdowns, carried tool bags up, 16 flights of stairs when the only elevator in the building was out of service. A bit of everything. So it was a good time to be around a bunch of great people.
Right, right, right. It sounds like a true immersion in the industry, to from the field to the engineering to just kind of seeing everything that goes into it.
Absolutely. I think I count myself very fortunate that he gave me such great opportunities. I mean, I went out again for another 3 months on new construction, and got to see how that side of the business worked. Again, just go out and learn, and that was it. So I still love field work whenever the opportunity arises. It's still a highlight of my career, to spend time on job sites working on great projects with people that are really top of their game. And I've certainly had the opportunity to work with people that have worked on some of the biggest installs around the world. I mean, up to the people that worked on Burj Khalifa. I know a few of those were colleagues of mine, and you know good people doing great things. So
That's awesome. That's really cool. What would you say is the most rewarding thing you do or have done throughout your career?
I think definitely some of the development projects that I've worked on. A lot of the times it's simple things just to get a product introduced. For the first time. We had one project that involved an older controller that Otis had, the Elevonic 401, that customers wanted to upgrade. And at the time, there was no solution available. So, we were challenged by our customers in Australia to come up with a way of doing that effectively for them. And so I pretty much solo worked on that for probably 12 months or so, developing an interface and some software that brought the new generation of controllers and the old one together in a way that was seamless to the customer, and certainly saved a lot of time and headaches on modernization to get it done. So
Yeah, and I think you
wonderful.
told me a little bit about that was really the customers that were pushing. Whereas when you talk to the people at headquarters in the US, they're like, we don't we don't even see a need for that because our customers haven't said anything. But the Australian customers are like banging on your door saying, get this done. It sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think having traveled a little bit around the world and the elevator industry, you realize that Australians, for whatever reason, just love new technology and look for new solutions. I think part of it's maybe because they're so far from the rest of the world. I mean,
Interesting.
everything in Australia is a long haul flight to get to Europe or Asia or the US. And so I think they pride themselves in wanting to push things along, because
Mm.
if they don't do it, no one else will for them. So
It'll be years until it actually shows up in Australia if they're not pulling for it, right?
absolutely. I mean, interesting fun fact. Destination dispatching, which is a current product, it was developed by a guy called Leo Port, who was an Australian way back in it's either the late 50s or early 60s.
Wow.
But it never really took off because the technology wasn't ready for his idea, and it took a lot longer till the early 90s before that
Wow.
sort of became
So
a
he
thing.
had the theory, the thought, and everything, and just not the technology to support it. Apparently,
Exactly, yeah. So
that is fascinating. So tell me how the Otis 401 modernization project really helped shape your career, because you mentioned you'd been working on it. We're kind of a year, I guess, on your own. Is that right?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, apart from a small bit of hardware that another engineer worked on, it was pretty much me solo. I spent a lot of time in machine rooms late at night, at a job site in downtown Sydney, and ironing all that out for the first job. Then there was another job in Melbourne, and then there was some interest from the US when I sort of said, "Hey guys, this is what we've come up with. It works for us. Maybe it'll work for you." Um, And from there was a few jobs in one in Texas, one in and one in New York City at Fifth and 85 Broadway. That they used the software. We provided a couple of bits of hardware, and they used it there. And from there, I guess, you know, they saw that yes, this was viable. It worked. You know, let's figure out how to productize it a little more than we could with the limited resources in Australia.
Right. So help me just, obviously not being nearly as educated in some of these things as you are, and maybe for some of our listeners that, what was it that you were accomplishing? So you were basically taking the 401 and connecting it to newer technology or something like that?
Yeah, Otis's current product at that time was the 411 controller, which was a completely different architecture. It had different ways of communicating with the controllers.
They hadn't even built it to integrate with their own system, in other words.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, when 401 came out, it was actually done by some guys who work for Hamilton Test Systems, which was a division. Let me give you some history. Otis was originally a standalone company until
Right.
76, and then United Technologies bought Otis, and so it became part of UTC's umbrella, and that included a company called Hamilton Test Systems, which did um, avionics type work.
Okay.
And if you looked at the 401 controller, it looked like it could have been on, a rack of electronics in a warplane or on a space station or something like that. It definitely didn't look like anything Otis had ever done because these other engineers designed it,
Right.
and that was sort of 79. Um, and so then Otis subsequently developed the 411 series of products and the other products in that family, and that was really predominantly German driven initially, and then with the US involved. And it was just a completely different group of engineers, and they never thought about how to interface the old with the new. It was basically a clean slate design that didn't incorporate anything from 401.
So why was it that the Australians kind of pushing ahead were like, hey, this needs to connect? What problems were they kind of bumping into as they were dealing with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest problem you have whenever you modernize a group of elevators is that inevitably, if you have, say, 6 elevators, to modernize them, you've got to take one out of service. So straight away you go from having 6 to 5, and the first thing that happens is in a busy building is you lose the ability to handle as much traffic as effectively by being a car down. So then when you've got that controller modernized, now you have 5 of the old and 1 of the new, and there's no way for them to share the load
Okay.
between the old and the new. Um, and obviously, then you get to the point where you've got 4 old cars and 2 new ones,
Oh,
and
wow.
the ratio keeps on changing. And you could put in separate hole buttons for each one, but then people being people will press both buttons, which makes
Of
both
course.
systems busy, right? And so what I did, and we dubbed it chameleon, and the reason was the little colorful lizards that change colors to
Sure.
let camouflage themselves. And so the software that I did, which what was another engineer, a field guy, came up with that name. But effectively, it allowed you to mimic the 401 cars. So the 401 had a separate group controller cabinet, and it thought that it was talking to just another 401 when in fact it was talking now to a
Oh,
new
wow.
411. And so that meant that you press one lot of whole buttons, the 401 group dispatcher makes the decision, happens to send it to a 411 car modernized, and it goes away and answers the whole call, and it just looks like another 401 car.
So you never really have to go through. It almost sounds like, yeah, some kind of bottleneck where if you're modernizing these 6, you're going to end up with a group of 3 and 3 or 2 and 4, and it's going to be awkward for quite some time depending on how long it takes you to get through those.
Yeah, yeah, and in Australia in particular, they used one of Otis's monitoring systems, and again, the security guard or whoever was looking at that, all he saw was a group of 6 elevators, and he couldn't tell which was old or which was new.
Sure.
And when people use their card reader and swipe their card when they got in the elevator to register the call, that also went through that system, and it just was all seamless. So that's something. I mean, the end user experience in everything we do matters. I mean, whether it's
Oh,
that
sure.
sort of case or it's a mechanic, interfacing with the equipment and trying to do diagnostics or set it up. Trying to make that easy for them is definitely something. As a software person, I definitely keep in mind because going back to my early field experience, I work with a fairly experienced mechanic. He could listen to the relays on those old relay
Sure.
logic controllers, clatter, 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 nothing, clatter, clatter. He's like, well, something's missing in the middle there, right? I mean, he just had the ear for that.
Almost like Morse code, like did.
Almost like that, yeah. Whereas with software, I mean, it's completely silent. I mean,
Sure.
and a lot of what it does is completely invisible. Whereas those relay controllers, I mean, you could see, relays in, relays out,
Right.
and or them changing, right? So that's something that's really changed our industry, and I think it's hard because you know people can't see what's going on behind the scenes anymore.
Sure, sure. So you've obviously got to have the some kind of digital readout or some kind of device to tell what's going on. Um, so tell me, you mentioned just some of the feedback that you had gotten, or I'm trying to remember. You had come to the U.S. I think because of that project, right? Because of the 401, and you spend this time creating it, and now there's demand, and it's like, oh, we need somebody who knows what this is and how to implement it. You tell
Yeah,
us a little bit
yeah.
about that.
There was one project that was out in Chicago at the Aon Center, the old
Okay.
Standard Oil building. It's about, I think it's 75 or so floors high, and they had double deck 401s there. Um, and the work I'd done in Australia was for a single deck 401s. So
Okay.
so they wanted to modernize those. It was an 8-car group, so big, big, big job. Biggest Otis machines, the 339 HTs, which are taller than I am.
Right.
Um, and they were doing the mod there. And so again, being able to put this software in was going to really help them, with this mod process. And so, because it's the first of type, and I'd written the original software, we had a plan. I was going to come to Connecticut for about a week, spend some time with the engineers there, then travel with one of them, a guy called Dave Hughes, out to Chicago and spend a week there getting this, dialed in and making sure it all worked the way everyone hoped it would. So yeah, traveled there with Dave, and Dave said, the field engineer out in Chicago, he's going to ask a few questions about what's going on. And sure enough, we get there, and he's like, so why is this guy from Australia come all the way to Chicago for this project? Like, what could he possibly do that I couldn't do? And so we went and had lunch and sat down with Bobby and explained exactly why I was there, and he was still a little skeptical. And we got to the job site and got to the point where we could put the software in and give it a whirl. And he was like, "Wow, this is amazing." So that was definitely a fun moment, and
Yeah.
we got that project done, and it went very smoothly. So.
Right. Well, did that have any bearing on you actually moving to the U.S.? Because obviously you were getting known at headquarters and out in the field. And how did that work that you came to the U.S.?
Yeah, so Otis's headquarters are in Farmington, Connecticut, and and shortly after that project, probably about 6 months later, they reached out to me, and the manager of the group that wanted to hire me actually had worked in Australia. He started his career there,
Cool.
while I was still a trainee engineer. I'd taught him a few things about how our software worked, and then he jumped around the Otis world, with his own career, and spent time in Malaysia and Germany, and ultimately ended up in the US. And so
Did he
they
call you young Jason? Was that
no, he wasn't much older than me, so I was just Jason to him. But anyway, so he, they set up I had a position opening, and they offered me the job. I came across. They brought me across with my wife. We had a look around. Offered me the job, and in about, it was probably less than, right, 5 months. I had visa, U.S. visa to work here, and we're packing up our family, and and my wife and I and three kids. The oldest was like in fifth grade, then second grade, and the other one was not even two.
Oh,
And
wow.
we were on this grand adventure moving to USA. So
What year was that you actually came?
that was October 2006. So
Okay.
just before Halloween, we spent Halloween and the next couple of months in the Residence Inn, which is kind of interesting. We got a family of three, in a
Right.
small room for that. And then we managed to. Our stuff was on a ship. They put everything in a
Oh,
26-foot
wow.
shipping container. And so our whole life was, packed into the basement then of our rental property for about 6 months, and then we bought a house a little while later. So. And we've
That
been here
sounds
ever
like
since.
quite the ordeal to just, I never really thought about, yeah, just the shipping container. I don't even know how long it takes to get a ship from Australia to Eastern US.
Yeah,
So,
it was pretty much close to 2 months. So
okay,
so we'd had a couple of suitcases. We had a few boxes, packing boxes that they sort of express shipped across. So they some basic things like the home PC,
sure.
and some paperwork and extra clothes or whatever, and that's what we had in this residence in uh,
Months.
for a couple of months. So yeah, it was quite an adventure. It was a fun adventure though. I mean, for my wife, I mean, she was still the mum of three young boys. For me, I was still an Otis engineer at the time. Working with people that I guess I'd corresponded with over many
Sure.
many years leading up. And by that stage, I'd been with the company for over 20 years, and some of those people I'd had back and forth interactions with for probably the best part of 15 plus.
Sure.
So it was fun to actually work face to face with people that you only ever had communicated with by in those days. I mean, it was still fax machines, uh,
My.
telexes, the very occasional phone call. I mean, there was no video conferencing, for a lot of that time. And certainly nothing like Zoom calls or Teams meetings or anything like that. So, a couple of us had met a few times at some worldwide engineering meetings around the globe, but there was still a bunch of people I'd never had the chance to actually, face to face, even know what they look like. So
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny you say that because, I think I take, email and like I say, technology for granted, but it wasn't that long ago, right? I remember my first email is like 1996 or it was well beyond it was beyond high school and kind of
yeah.
starting college and I'm like what is this? I don't even know how to use it. And so yeah, a lot of your career correspondence yeah was like the dark ages compared from
Oh,
to where we are now.
we used to send inter-office memos, and it was on like a triplicate paper. So you'd press really hard to make sure it went through the three
Sure.
copies, and you'd send two away, you'd keep one, and then somebody would reply with their answer, or sort of you get one of the copies back.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't even know how those work, but that's amazing. So tell me, one of the things about the work you do as, being an engineer is it seems like it's really, it's behind the scenes. It's not only is our elevators in general kind of mysterious for a lot of certainly for the riding public because they don't know about the ropes and the shivs and but you're one step removed from that, it seems, because you're kind of behind all that. How do you judge the success of the work you do, and where does that show up for you?
Yeah, it's different things. I mean, it's something as simple as getting in an elevator and seeing the nameplate on the sill on the older ones, or a placard on the car operating panel that has the company's name, or recognizing part of a product and going, I worked on that.
Right.
That's exciting. Sometimes in the case of that modernization product for 401, there was a spreadsheet I'd filled out or created for a site survey, and that had my name on it with, like, any questions, contact Jason, right? And for a long time after I'd transferred that responsibility to the US operation to take care of that, I still got phone calls from random people all around certainly North America with, hey, I got this problem with this and your name's on here. And I'm like, I told the guys, take my names off this. And I was still getting those for probably, the best part of 10 years or more afterwards. So, and definitely, when you have a successful product, sometimes hearing from your competitors is interesting. I'm no longer with Otis, as I mentioned to you. I work for G.A.L, which is part of Advantage. And one of our sales guys, we were chatting, and I said, I worked on this product. And he said, he worked at TKE at the time. He said, we could not sell a modernization against that. It was just too good. And that's obviously the highest compliment you can get when you're somebody who's a competitor, recognizes that it was tough to sell against. So, that's satisfying. I think sometimes on product development, when you're on a job site and it's the first time that you're actually handing over the equipment to a customer,
Sure.
and you see a difference in the way the building behaves or the traffic flows, and you're just like, we did it, and the consultants and the building management are looking at each other and going, wow, because they maybe didn't have the confidence that you had going into it. So, those things are definitely very, very satisfying. You know, I think that's part of the thrill of being an elevator engineer and designing great products that people use day in, day out without ever knowing who you are.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and it sounds like some of that, uh, some of the praise, it sounds like it was, 20, 30 years later that you're actually hearing, wow, that was impossible to sell again. Just that's got to be, like you say, very rewarding to hear that, hey, you did a good thing. Even all these years later, we remember how good that was.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the same since joining Vantage and GL. We've done some great work there too. We have a destination dispatch job down in Puerto Rico. We got up and running, 16, 17 months ago now. When that's running, it's a class building down there in the business district,
Yeah.
and some really high class tenants. And when you see them using the system, and giving you a happy smile and two thumbs up as they see you in the lobby, as you're sort of keeping an eye on it. I mean, there's something just when you bring that smile to somebody's face. And I mean, elevators aren't normally something people smile about much, right? I mean, generally it's oh, I hope I don't get trapped in this darn thing.
Right.
Or, you normally hear the bad side of things, but to see the good part of it, and there's obviously a lot of good. I mean, we move a lot of people around the world,
Sure.
around the US and
Yeah, yeah,
Canada
yeah.
every day, on our products. So, that's
That's
something
awesome.
that every elevator engineer, I mean, from the people who design it, to the people in the factories who build it, to the customers that we sell to, who install it and service it, they should be proud. I mean, it's a pretty unique industry in that regard.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's I guess end with a couple questions. We're kind of getting short on our time here, but what would you say is the single most important thing you've learned throughout your career in the elevator industry?
Well, I think one thing is obviously, there always could be a better way for doing something. And sometimes you need to think outside the box to realize what that
Sure.
is. Uh, Sometimes you need to do that and go out on a bit of a limb yourself, like, pitch the idea and have faith that it's gonna work out, and then work hard to make sure it does. You got to do your homework, because there's a lot of things can go wrong if you don't consider all of the scenarios and all the options. But when you get it right, it's smiles around.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What advice would you give to someone who's either interested or maybe just starting a career?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of people in engineering, and I mean, I'm in software these days. People think of the big names. They think of the Facebooks, Amazons, Apples, Netflix, Googles, and stuff like that, right? And they think those are very glamorous careers, but they've also got incredible pressure, incredible burnout.
Yeah.
I think the elevator industry is a very rewarding career path. Lots of variation in the sort of projects and product you work on. You touch on a lot of different aspects, from the control electronics to understanding the A17 elevator code and how that applies to your designs, to the people factors, just how usable your product is. Um, and I think it's also a very stable career path. I mean, I've only had two employers in the elevator industry in 38 years. That's a pretty good run.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean, through good times and bad times, when the economy may have its ups and downs, I mean, people still need elevators for their ups and downs, to
sure.
get them in and out of their apartments, to get them in and out of their offices and hotels and all those other places. So, it's got a degree of recession proofness in it that a lot of other industries don't have. Um, and I think that working with great people across the spectrum of everyone from sales to mechanics and everyone in between. Those people are some of the I mean, still, people I started work with, I still keep in contact with all these years later. In fact, a couple of years I was back in Australia, I caught up with that mechanic I told you about that I
Right.
spent 4 months with, and we still keep in contact all these years later. And, he's retired now, but we still share elevator stories, and I laugh about the good times and smile about the good times we had. So
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you being with me today. Thanks for being willing to do the interview, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you a little better.
it's been a pleasure to chat with you too, Matt. I hope our paths cross physically. We can shake hands and smile and share a few more stories together.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.